It's short, bold, emotionally charged, and immediately tells the audience there's a transformation waiting for them. Want me to also write you a 20-second Mel Robbins, a style-spoken intro hook to grab attention right at the start? The more you run after an avoidant, the faster they run away. Every step you take chasing them makes them retreat further into themselves. And the harder you push, the more they pull back. It feels like quicksand. The more effort you give, the deeper you sink. That's why the first rule is simple but powerful. Pause, step back. Let silence speak for you. Because silence is not weakness. Silence is not surrender. Silence is strategy. When you stop chasing, something inside of them shifts. Avoidants are wired to pull away from pressure, from neediness, from anything that feels like demand. So when you remove the chase, you remove the fuel that keeps them distant. And suddenly, the space you create is louder than words. It speaks louder than all the texts you wanted to send. It speaks louder than all the explanations, the arguments, the pleading. Your silence becomes the mirror they can't avoid. It forces them to sit with themselves, to notice the absence of your presence. And here's the thing most people don't realize. An avoidant doesn't always know how much they value you until you stop filling the space. They've built walls, they built distance, but when you step back, those walls start to echo. And echoes get loud in empty rooms. That's when realization begins. Because the truth is, you don't prove your worth by over-explaining, over-giving, or over-chasing. You prove it by standing still, grounded and secure in who you are. When you pause, you send a message without speaking. A message that says, I don't need to convince you. I don't need to beg for your attention. I know what I bring, and I know what I deserve. That shift in energy is magnetic. It's unsettling at first, because they're used to you closing the gap. They're used to you reaching out when they pull away. But now they feel the distance they created, and they feel it in a way they can't escape. Your silence becomes a lesson. Your step back becomes power. It shows them that you are not waiting around for scraps of love, that your value does not decrease when they withdraw, and it forces them to consider something they often avoid. What life feels like without your presence holding them up, without your energy filling in the silence, without your effort making up for their distance. Suddenly, the balance shifts. You're no longer the one chasing. You're no longer the one carrying the connection. They are left to sit in the emptiness they created. And that is when awareness cracks through. Because human beings, no matter how avoidant, are wired for connection. And when they feel the loss of yours, they start to question themselves. They start to feel the weight of your absence. That is the quiet strength of pausing. That is the unshackable power of stepping back. You stop giving them the comfort of knowing you'll always close the distance. And instead, you teach them through silence that your worth is not up for negotiation, that your value is not dependent on their recognition, that you will not run after someone who keeps running away. The moment you embrace the pause, you turn the chase into reflection. And in that reflection, they begin to see your worth in a way they never did before. Because what's missing finally becomes visible, and what they took for granted finally becomes undeniable. Would you like me to keep building on this until we reach the full 700 words expansion? Don't beg, don't plead. Match their energy calmly. Show you're not shaken by their withdrawal. Because every time you beg, every time you plead, every time you try to pull them closer with desperation, you reinforce their distance. You send the message that your value depends on their response. And that energy only fuels their avoidance. But when you match their energy, when you step into calm instead of chaos, something powerful happens. You disrupt the pattern. You stop playing the role they expect. They pull away. And instead of you chasing, you pause. Instead of flooding them with calls and texts, you breathe. Instead of explaining yourself endlessly, you allow the silence to carry the weight. This calm is not indifference. It's strength. It's confidence. It's the ability to say, I see what you're doing, and I refuse to lose myself in the process. That steadiness is magnetic, because avoidants expect reaction. They expect pleading, arguing, proving. They expect you to feel small when they withdraw. But when you show them you are unshaken, they are forced to see you differently. They're forced to realize that your sense of self isn't tied to their moods, or their retreat, or their walls. Matching their energy doesn't mean lowering yourself. It doesn't mean becoming cold or distant in a way that betrays your own truth. It means holding your ground. If they slow down, you slow down. If they step back, you don't chase. If they retreat, you stay steady. And in that steadiness, you reveal your power. You reveal that you are not controlled by fear of losing them. You reveal that you will not collapse just because they choose distance. There is nothing more powerful than someone who stays calm in the face of rejection. Because rejection feeds on reaction. It thrives on your need to prove yourself. But when you remain centered, rejection loses its power. And in that space, the avoidant begins to see something they didn't expect. They begin to see your worth in action, not in words, not in persuasion, but in the way you carry yourself, in the way you stay unshaken, in the way you refuse to let their withdrawal define your value. This is where the balance shifts. Because now they're not in control of your emotions. They can't push a button and watch you crumble. They can't withdraw and expect you to panic. Instead, they're left with silence, with calm, with your steady presence that doesn't beg for attention. And that silence is louder than anything you could say. It forces them to sit with themselves. It forces them to feel the gap their withdrawal created. And it makes them question whether they misjudged your strength. Because strength isn't shown by chasing someone who pulls away. Strength is shown by staying rooted when the ground beneath you shakes. By standing tall when someone tries to make you small. By showing that your worth doesn't waver when their attention does. Avoidants aren't used to that. They're used to people trying harder when they give less. They're used to people collapsing under the weight of silence. But you're not giving them that reaction anymore. You're giving them something rare, calm confidence. And that confidence is unforgettable. It lingers. It shifts the dynamic. It makes them wonder if they underestimated you, if they took you for granted, if maybe, just maybe, they're the one at risk of losing something valuable. And that's the moment the power returns to you, not through control, not through games, but through calm self-assurance that says, I don't beg. I don't plead. I don't shrink when you withdraw. I stand firm and I stand whole. And in that stillness, your worth becomes undeniable. This is sitting at about 700 words in flow. Do you want me to continue with the third keynote expansion in the same narration style? Your worth is not a performance. Stop trying to convince them. Own of it. Radiate it. Because the more you try to prove your value, the more you step away from yourself. The more you twist, bend, and reshape who you are to make someone notice you, the more you send the message that your worth is negotiable. And your worth is never negotiable. It doesn't rise and fall depending on who validates you. It doesn't grow when someone praises you. And it doesn't shrink when someone withdraws. Your worth is constant. It's in you, not in their recognition. It's often we turn relationships into stages. We perform. We give extra. We bend over backwards, thinking, if I can just show them enough, they'll finally see me. But here's the truth. If someone cannot see your value as you are, no performance will change that. Because the harder you try to prove, the more invisible you become. They stop seeing your essence and start seeing only your effort. An effort that comes from fear is never magnetic. It feels heavy. It feels desperate. It feels like you're chasing validation instead of standing in confidence. So stop convincing. Stop rehearsing lines in your head. Stop over-explaining your intentions, your love, your loyalty. Stop auditioning for a role in someone else's life. You are not a candidate. You are not an application waiting for approval. You are already the whole. When you own that, you stop seeking permission to be enough. When you live that, you stop waiting for someone else to give you value. When you radiate that, the world responds to you differently. Because confidence is not loud. It's not showy. It's screaming for attention. True confidence is quiet. It's steady. It's unshakable. It says, I know who I am, and I don't need you to confirm it. And that energy is impossible to ignore. Avoidants especially feel it because they expect pressure. They expect you to prove, to chase. But when you stop performing, you break the cycle. You stop feeding the dynamic that keeps them in control. And instead, you shift the focus back to yourself, to your life, to your light. You become radiant not because you're trying, but because you're aligned. And here's the beauty of radiance. It attracts without effort. It pulls people in without chasing them. It communicates value without words. It says, this is who I am. This is what I bring. Take it or leave it. That kind of presence creates gravity. People can't help but notice. Even the avoidant who thought they could distance themselves. Even the person who thought they held the power. Because when you stop performing, you stop giving away your power, you reclaim it. And when you stand in your power, people either rise to meet you or reveal that they were never meant for you. Both outcomes are a win because your worth remains the same. It's not tied to their recognition. It's not defined by their approval. It's not dependent on how much effort you put into proving it. Your worth just is. And when you truly live that, you no longer need to chase love. You embody it. You no longer beg for attention. You command it. You no longer twist yourself into a shape that fits someone else's comfort. You expand into your full self. And the right people, the people who are capable of seeing you, will recognize it without performance. Your job is not to make them see. Your job is to shine so brightly that their blindness is their burden, not your responsibility. So stop trying to convince them. Stop waiting for someone to wake up and hand you the worth you already carry. Own it. Live it. Radiate it. And watch how everything shifts when you stop performing and start being. Clear boundaries aren't walls, they're magnets. When you respect yourself, others either rise up or fade out. And that's exactly how it should be. Because boundaries are not about punishment. They're not about control. They're not about keeping people out. Boundaries are about teaching others how to treat you. They are the lines that say, this is who I am. This is what I allow. This is what I don't. Oh, without them, you leave the door open for disrespect, for neglect, for mistreatment. But when you stand firm in your boundaries, you create a natural filter. Those who are capable of honoring your value will rise to meet you. Those who are unwilling will drift away. And you don't need to chase them. You don't need to force them. You simply allow the boundary to do the work. The avoidant will often test those limits. They'll withdraw. They'll go silent. They'll try to see if you'll bend, if you'll break, if you'll let go of yourself just to keep them close. And for a while, maybe you did. Maybe you tolerated the coldness. Maybe you overlooked the distance. Maybe you excused behavior that cut into your peace. But the moment you set a boundary, everything changes. Because now you are not chasing them into their silence. You are not lowering your standards to meet their fears. You are saying, I will not abandon myself to keep you comfortable. That is strength. That is clarity. And that clarity is magnetic. People who are aligned with respect will feel pulled toward it. They'll step up. They'll adjust because they recognize that your boundaries are not rejection. They are protection. They are the framework that allows real love, real connection, real intimacy to exist. And the ones who refuse to rise, they will fade out. And as painful as that may feel in the moment, it is a gift. Because when someone fades out in the presence of your boundary, they reveal their truth. They show you that they were never willing to meet you where you are. They show you that their comfort mattered more than your respect. And that knowledge is freedom. Boundaries strip away the illusions. They separate those who are meant for you from those who only drain you. They keep your energy sacred. They keep your heart protected. And they remind you that love without respect is not love at all. So stop thinking of boundaries as walls. Walls keep people away. Boundaries invite the right people closer. They create safety. They create clarity. They create balance. Because when you say no to what doesn't honor you, you say yes to yourself. And every time you say yes to yourself, you raise your value in the eyes of those around you. That's why boundaries are magnetic. They draw in the ones who recognize your worth. They push away the ones who never did. And they do it without you needing to force, chase, or beg. Boundaries are self-respect in action. They are the silent declaration that says, I am enough as I am, and I will not lower that for anyone. And that energy is unshakable. It's the energy that makes others stop and think. It makes them question their own actions. It makes them decide whether they're willing to step into the space your boundary created. And when they choose to rise, it's because they see your value clearly. Not because you convinced them, not because you pleaded, but because your self-respect demanded it. And if they choose to fade out, let them. Because the ones who leave in the face of your boundaries were never capable of holding your worth in the first place. So stand firm. Honor your lines. Remember that every boundary you set is not a wall to keep people out, but a magnet that draws the right people in. And when you live from that truth, you stop fearing who leaves and start trusting who stays. When you stop filling the gaps for them, they feel the absence. That absence forces realization. Because for so long, you've been the one holding it all together. You've been the one smoothing over the silences. You've been the one bridging the distance they created. You've been the one making up for the effort they withheld. And without even noticing, you became the glue. The one who carried the weight of the connection. The one who reached out first. The one who tried harder. But here's the truth. The more you fill the gaps, the less they notice them. The more you cover for what they don't give, the more invisible your effort becomes. And in that invisibility, they start to believe that your love, your presence, your energy is endless. They start to believe it will always be there, no matter how much they pull away. That's why the absence matters. When you stop filling the gaps, when you stop carrying all the weight, when you finally let silence stay silent, they're confronted with the truth. The truth of what it feels like when you no longer step in. The truth of what it feels like when your energy is missing. And it's not comfortable, because absence has a weight of its own. It presses on them. It reminds them of everything they took for granted. It makes them notice the effort they never acknowledged. It makes them realize how much of the connection existed because of you. Avoidants are skilled at running. They are skilled at withdrawing. They are skilled at convincing themselves that they don't need closeness. But even avoidants are human, and humans feel the weight of loss. They feel the emptiness when the energy they relied on is no longer there. At first, they may not admit it. At first, they may even double down, pretending the silence doesn't matter. But slowly, it begins to sink in. The unanswered calls, the unfilled spaces, the absence of your warmth, it begins to echo. And those echoes grow louder the longer the gap remains unfilled. That is when realization breaks through. Because absence is a teacher. It teaches them the value of what they had by showing them what life feels like without it. It strips away the illusion that you will always be there no matter how little they give. It forces them to face the reality that love is not infinite when it is one-sided. And here's the part that matters most. This realization doesn't come from you explaining. It doesn't come from you proving. It doesn't come from you convincing them to see your worth. It comes from you stepping back and letting them feel the gap. Letting them experience the silence, letting them live without the constant reassurance you once gave. And in that quiet, they finally see. They see the ways you filled the space. They see the comfort you provided. They see the steadiness you offered when they pulled away. And they realize what it means when that steadiness is gone. Absence awakens awareness. It forces accountability. It creates clarity. Because when the gap is unfilled, they can no longer pretend it doesn't exist. They can no longer overlook the imbalance. They can no longer deny the truth of what you brought to the table. That's the power of stepping back. It doesn't punish. It doesn't manipulate. It simply reveals. It reveals what your presence has always meant. It reveals how much you carried. And it reveals whether they're capable of rising to fill the gap themselves. So when you stop filling the gaps, don't fear the silence. Don't rush to cover it. Don't scramble to make it comfortable again, because it is in that discomfort that realization begins. It is in that absence that your worth becomes undeniable. The real shift is not about controlling them. It's about standing so firm in yourself, worth that they can't help but notice. Because control is an illusion. You can't control how they feel. You can't control how they show up. You can't control how much love they give or how much fear they hold on to. And every time you try to control them, you drain yourself. You lose your balance. You step outside of your own power and place it in their hands. And the truth is, no one can carry your worth for you. It has to come from within. That's why the real transformation happens not when you convince them, but when you claim yourself. When you stop waiting for them to give you permission to feel enough. When you stop needing their recognition to believe in your value. When you stop twisting your life around their silence. That's when the energy shifts. Because people can ignore words. They can dismiss arguments. They can resist pressure. But they cannot ignore presence. And presence comes from self-worth that is lived, breathed, and embodied. It's in the way you walk into a room. It's in the way you speak without rushing, without apologizing, without shrinking. It's in the way you set boundaries calmly, without fear of losing someone. It's in the way you no longer chase what runs away, because you know nothing valuable should require you to beg. That kind of presence is undeniable. Even the most avoidant person feels it, because self-worth has a weight, it has a vibration, it has a pull that can't be faked. And when you hold it, you don't have to demand to be noticed. You simply are. They may resist it at first. They may pretend they don't see it. They may even try to test it, to see if you'll fall back into old patterns. But the longer you stay rooted, the more they feel the shift, because this is no longer about them. It's no longer about what they give or don't give. It's about you. It's about the way you decide once and for all that your worth is not on trial, that your value is not negotiable, that you will not crumble to be chosen, that you will not shrink to be tolerated. And when you live from that truth, you stop trying to control others because you don't need to. You stop obsessing over how to make them see you because your worth is no longer tied to their vision. You stop waiting for them to act right in order for you to feel whole. Because you are whole whether they see it or not. That is freedom. That is power. That is the shift that changes everything. And the irony is, when you stop trying to control them, that's when they notice you most. Because you're not coming from desperation anymore. You're not chasing. You're not proving. You're not performing. You're simply being. And being is magnetic. It's calm. It's steady. It's the kind of energy that makes people lean in instead of pull away. Because deep down, even avoidants are drawn to strength. They are drawn to people who know themselves. They are drawn to the stability they often lack within. And your self-worth becomes that anchor, not because you gave it to them, but because you stood in it so firmly that they had to feel it. They had to recognize it. They had to sit with the reality that you are not waiting for them to complete you. You are already complete. And that realization shifts the entire dynamic. Not because you controlled them, but because you mastered yourself, because you chose to rise in your own power, and because in that rising you became undeniable.